Hey everyone, I wanted to have a little chat with you guys, or at least offer a little bit of a perspective. I don't know if any of the people that are in the thread are going to listen to what I'm saying, or even find this video, so I'm going to go ahead and post it anyway and try to figure out a place to put it when I'm done. And basically, it's to offer a bit of perspective about things that can be done in certain situations. And to make my point, I had posted something in a meme that was posted about Marissa's hearing, and I wasn't aware that there was a hearing. Must have been preoccupied doing something else. But one of the things that I had watched when I was going through the thread was I was watching people and their comments, like we commonly do. And one of the things that I do is I sit and I watch people complain. And I know that you don't know my life and I don't know yours. But let's just, for all intents and purposes, say that we just don't know what each other's life is like, and we can only imagine that, or what other people's life is like. And that being said, is the comment that I made was, "Wah, or what are we going to do about it? Just sit and bitch." Okay, nobody likes that. And I kind of did it for a reason. I did poke the bear a little bit, and I did it because I really want, if in the midst of trying to share my perspective and trying to help navigate people in a way that I believe that would be more helpful, you have to agitate people to the point where they will openly ask questions. Or even make rude comments. And I wanted to go through some of those with you to help you understand my perspective for what it's worth. Um, I had um, I had Jared Green comment, and he said, "Will any of the businesses owned by Republicans actually trespass all cops and attorneys from their store? Serve them not for their first loyalty is to darkness. Child abusers should be afraid in order to sandwich anywhere." Basically, if I were to understand what he's saying here, is he's basically writing off the fact that the Republican establishment are the ones that are actually in control, making it okay for these trespassing charges to happen. And I would totally agree. What I would also agree is that the citizens that mostly post in the video, in the comments that I see, are operating out of emotion more than they are out of intellect. And I mean, there is a bit of intellectuality. I'm not saying we're stupid. I'm just saying that most of the things are forcing us to take a defensive or a reactive position, which is something I don't appreciate, although I'm there too. What I'm trying to do is to figure out a way to be able to bring us more to an offensive position, or at least come up from a lesser defensive position than we have before. So basically, in the comment that relates to that, I would say, you know, we haven't done a very good job electing Republicans into office, first of all. If we were informed, these Republicans, if we were to hold government accountable and the establishment was getting in there and we had a better ground game, my argument is that the Republican establishment would not have the power and control it has today. And a perfect example of that is looking at the people that are running for office now, the caliber of people that were running for office. If this would have happened decades ago, we wouldn't be having this problem to the degree that we're having. So to sit here and to condemn Republican establishment like I do, is, in my view, I am also condemning the people that actually allowed them to become in office. Nobody wants to give up their freedom that I would know. I think if people had a choice, they would rather choose to control others. But in this particular instance, I strongly believe that if the people were holding government accountable to begin with, we wouldn't be having to bitch about the Republican establishment. Um, let's see. Eva Selleck said, I guess the question I have is, what are you going to do now? When you start something, I'm sure others will show up and help you." I'm not so sure that that's true, Eva. There are many things that I've tried to do in the past. I'm not buttsore about it. I know that people follow certain people and they follow them for certain reasons. And I am not one of those people that people might trust me, but they're not interested in following me because they probably don't either understand what I'm saying, or they believe that what they're interested in is more would bring about more success. And plus, what I do in the way of activism is something far different than I used to. I used to be an individualist. I used to be an activist individualist, somebody that used to act on my own. I was members of all kinds of different groups, but I wasn't a member of just one. And so that allowed me to be able to see where I was going to fit. Was I the square peg in a round hole? Was I going to fit in with the Sovereign Citizen group or the Law group or the Tea Party group or all of that? And really what I had found out was I didn't really fit in any one of those. Trying to be able to trying to not necessarily lead because I want to be a leader. I just am offering a perspective because I believe that there's a different way to be able to do things. Thank you, Heidi, for that. I believe that there's a different way to do things, and some other people don't, clearly. It isn't that I don't want to lead. I'm not afraid to take a back seat, but if people aren't going to be communicating with what I'm communicating about, and I believe it's that important, then I'm going to do what I can to encourage people to join the efforts of what we're trying to do. Let's see. So I'm getting harassed for condemning people for sitting and bitching. Let's see. And then Heidi comes to my rescue, speaking for me, which she did a pretty good job on, I got to tell you. And then Sarah, my friend Sarah, says, at least I was there to support Marissa. Where were you? And that's a good question. Where was I? And I thought I could gone down there. And then I thought for a minute, you know what? I didn't even know that it was, I didn't even know it was there. I didn't know that the court hearing was that day. I was obviously occupied in something else. And, but the other thing that I would consider if I knew about it now is, why would I go? Well, one, I would go to support Marissa and baby Cyrus for sure. I would support some of the other people that are awake enough to do something about this. But ultimately, aside from supporting somebody else that's in the court process, what are we going to do? Okay, this is my mindset. What are we going to do that's going to do more than this? Okay, so we have Sarah Brady. She was arrested for, taking her kids to the playground. We all know it's a tragic story, right? But it's happened already. So what are we going to do? Well, I would argue, first of all, it never should have happened ever. It never should have happened in this country. So how did it happen in Meridian, Idaho? And that's where I hang my hat. I'm like, why did something happen when it shouldn't have happened? And there are several reasons for that. One of them that I believed was the fact that we could have launched an education campaign with law enforcement, for example, 10 years ago. I did it. I visited police chiefs and sheriffs around the entire state. I drove around, visited with all of them. And I know that, and at that point, everybody says, well, that Tom, he just became a jackbooted thug liquor supporter or whatever, right? The problem is all of these things that we're dealing with we're complaining and whining and bitching because we weren't doing anything proactive. We just wait, right? We wait for something to come. We see the hurricane or we see the tornado over in the distance, right? And it's like we don't really care. We're just focusing on it because I got to mow my lawn or I got to do whatever I'm doing. We're not even focusing on that, okay? That's what I believe that the American patriots are doing, okay? Oh, well, we need to get signed indictments and we need to, expose the fact that America's a corporation, or we have to expose the Bar Association, or we have to expose all this. Sure, we need to expose some of that stuff. But who are we exposing that to? Facebook? Are we keyboard warriors? Do we have major campaigns encouraging people about some of the things that they need to know? They don't, right? So I know that I must have made you a little upset there, Sarah, and I'm apologizing for doing it. And I commend you for what you're doing. I know you're everywhere and you're doing all of those things, and that's a wonderful thing. But I'm telling you, there's a reason why that happened to you. I'm not talking about the fact that people shouldn't support you now. I believe that people should, okay? But what is the point if all we're going to do is to be able to focus on somebody that got arrested? We got Ammon Bundy that's arrested for trespassing. We got Sarah that's arrested for trespassing. Good. What are we going to do? We're going to get 6 people and go to court and we're going to yell F you at the cops and we're just going to flip them fingers and then we're going to call for a prayer vigil 2 hours later? What are we going to do to restore the failed system? We already have people that are casualties, right? There is nothing that you or I are going to be able to do to be able to overcome these casualties. You don't think I've been on the phone with attorneys? I've got people that need help from attorneys all the time. They call me all the time. It's the number one request I get. Do you know an attorney? And you know, the only thing I can tell you out of all the attorneys I've ever talked to that actually know anything, Tom, I can't help you. Once they're involved in the court system, you've got to let them go through. So the only thing that we can do is take a proactive approach and launch a major ground game to be able to change the hearts and minds of people. Does that offer any bit of a clarification? I don't know that it does. I see the delineation. I don't know if anybody else does. And then some people, I think, let's see, Kelly Sawin says, what else do you have in mind? I've been at protests and hearings, but I'm open to suggestions. Greatly put. Let me ask you something. When you're at a protest, what's happening? Something has already taken place, right? The cops have already shown up. They're already wearing, you know, the governor's laid a mandate. What are you going to do? It's too late. Okay? You can show up and you can protest and you can exercise your freedom of expression, or God knows whatever they call it today. The problem still is that the offense has already happened. How is it that we can take, what is it going to take for us to be able to change our position from where we are right now to what we need to do on the other side of this failed system? Number one, you could say that we need to educate ourselves about exactly what happened, and then we need to educate other people to prevent this from ever happening again. That's what we need to do. You need to understand your rights. You need to understand the basics of law. Number one, do you have the point to do that? If you said, well, Tom, what do you want me to do? It's like, I want you to understand, I want you to read your Constitution, number one. Okay? I want you to read the state constitution, number two, including the Declaration of Rights. Okay? I want you to go and I want you to start talking to the Attorney General, for example, like I did. You can talk to the governor like I did. You can talk to the lieutenant governor like I did. You can talk to your local sheriff. Do you even know your local sheriff? Do you know your local police chief? Have you met the mayor? Have you met the city councilman? Have you met the commissioners? Have you communicated with them one-on-one to understand what kind of people they are? And the answer, sadly, and the reason for my post is most people don't. And my comments aren't necessarily meant for people that understand this stuff already. It's to be able to find the new people that have not understood our methodology, or the method of my madness, so to speak, and help them understand a little bit more about what's going on. It's like, wait a minute, I've never even seen you on Facebook before, right? I mean, we've been on Facebook. We know who the new people are. We know the people that are commenting. We see the new people that are, concerned about whatever. And then they end up making fun of me or you because they don't even know who we are. And I'm not saying we're special. I'm just saying we've been around a while, okay? There's a method to our madness that most people don't know, okay? So what do I have in mind? Those are some of the things I have in mind. Kelly Sawin, do you know what legislative district you're in? Do you know who your representatives are? Do you know who your governor is? Do you know who your city council is and your commissioners? I say this over and over and over again, not because I want you guys to roll your eyes and go, well, our country's failing. I don't have time to learn all that. You don't have time not to. Because the abuses that are happening to the citizens right now are going to happen because the government doesn't know any better. And there aren't enough citizens to hold government accountable. If the men and women would rather bitch than hold their government accountable and start building large coalitions of people, of educated people, to be able to help good people get into office, you're going to end up getting the same garbage that you get now. The other thing is if you end up being lucky enough to be able to get somebody in office, how are you going to know if somebody good that is in office makes a mistake? My classic example is Trump. People love Trump. Oh, Trump, I'm a MAGA supporter. When I came out and I said, you know what? Trump's position on a multitude of issues was horrible, unconstitutional. If Obama would have done him or Biden would have done him, you guys would have just lost your crap. You just would have lost it. But you didn't. You know what happened? You guys in all idol worship just said, oh, Trump, oh yeah, he can't do anything wrong. We ended up losing members because we ended up pointing out the fact that Trump had made mistakes, and I'm losing friendships with my own people because they said, oh, well, how dare you speak against Trump? It's like, well, how dare you speak against me then? If we can't hold each other accountable for the issues that we have and the constitutional nature thereof, then what's the point of the conversation in the first place? So, Nina Hellickson said, yeah, I take offense to that because I'm attending to support Marissa, sharing court proceedings to help concerned citizens be aware and open to suggestions, but not in a mean spirit. Greatly put. Greatly put. I would strongly encourage you not to take offense because we're all in this together. We're all in this together. And I think it's important that we have serious dialogue. It's important that I show my vulnerability. It's important that other people share their vulnerability, because what happens is we are trying to work together to be able to make things better. Okay? If I have something to say and you find it offensive, but you find but there's some merit to what I'm saying, then should it not be considered? If you end up saying something that offends me, should I, and it's worthwhile, should I not consider it? Writing you off as offensive, or you writing me off as offensive, is perfect proof that the leftist propaganda works. So here, let's look at this. So they said, well, I'm attending support for Marissa. Great. Okay. So if you're attending support for Marissa, what's happened? The issue with Marissa has already happened. What are you going to do now? So you're going to stand there. It's like I'm going to speak at an event, right? And you show up and you're like, "Ooh, I went to see Tom Muntz." Oh, and better, Emin Bundy. He's got more followers than I do. Oh, I went and saw Emin Bundy. And then what do? You go home. You don't do nothing. You just go home, right? I mean, I go to his rallies. He's got 80, 100 people. Well, those 80, 100 people, what are they doing? They continue to go to the rallies. Why aren't they 300 and 500 and then they're 1,200 and 1,500 and 15,000? Why is that? Maybe you can tell me. And I'm not being disrespectful. I'm just asking questions. The point of what Nina was saying was that she's already responding in a reactive way to something that's already happened. What are you going to do to prevent this from another Marissa happening? What are you going to do to prevent another baby Cyrus happening? Hey, Skip. Glad of you to join me, man. But what are we going to do? If the things have already done, then it's in our best interest to be able to understand, okay, how did that happen? And how do we prevent it from happening again? We're opening up a dialogue here. It's not about Democrat. It's not about Republican. Our problems are so much bigger than that. And the average person doesn't take time to understand what they are. And it's clear. People are still calling me a Republican. I can't listen to you, Tom. You're a Republican. But they don't realize I've been ripping on Republicans more than I rip on Democrats. So does that really make me a Republican? So attending support for Marissa, that's great. Show support for the people that are harmed. But what's it going to do to actually help them? What's it going to do to help the next culprit if something happens after that? I would argue nothing, right? And so what's happening all of this time is that government continues to empower itself because the people are not working together like we should. Sharing the court proceedings to help concerned citizens be aware. Sharing court proceedings. So let me think, if I understand what you're saying here, you're sharing court proceedings and you want people to be able to read the law. I have a news flash for you, and it's difficult to say. People are not even reading their constitutions. They're not even reading the Bill of Rights. And yet you think somebody's going to sit down and read court proceedings. The next thing to consider is once you read a court proceeding, what are you going to have them do with the court proceeding they read? What are you going to do about it? There has to be an action plan with everything that we're asking people to do. Okay? And I understand we're dealing with a war on multiple fronts, right? We've got to show up and support and protect our own. That's a good thing. But we have to be working on what we're going to do to prevent this stuff from happening again. I don't know how many times I can say it. Okay? Let's see. Heidi said, I don't speak for Tom. But in my comment, I am pointedly speaking against those that have the knowledge on what to do last month, who's doing nothing, while those that want to do something but don't know how are left hanging for themselves. And it's true. The problem is when some of these people, then when they have legal proceedings and they have abuses that even include evidence, by the way, why aren't you supporting them? For me, I get people call me all the time. Tom, what do? I need an attorney. It's like, I don't even know what to tell you. If it's just you and I, what power do we have as two people? We don't have that much power at all. Because the people that we're actually speaking to, no matter how right we are, don't understand what we're talking about. So what that forces us to do is say, okay, if we believe in something and we have evidence of the fact and we know that it's true and we know that the magistrate is a member of the bar and we know that the prosecuting attorney is a member of the bar and we know that defense attorney is a member of the bar, then who's in my defense? No one. But there are very few people that think of life like that. Only those of us that have been around. So we have to be able to not only support those people, we have to be able to figure out how to be able to approach and educate people about what we know to be able to create a movement. Creating a movement isn't getting on Facebook going, damn it, or what are you going to do? Whine and bitch and complain like I wrote? There was a method behind me doing that. And it was to be able to get people, because I knew that if I could throw that bait in there, people would grab onto it. And they surely did. Because what it does is it allows me now to be able to use this as a dialogue to be able to see if I can offer anything that makes any sense to anybody. Because if I don't, then I'm just like any other video on social media. I'm just like any other thing where people can just scroll on by. And you can. And that's the beauty of it. But ideas start with seeds. If, when you had somebody that had this idea about Marxism, they didn't realize where it was going to go. When somebody had a plan to be able to implement a certain thing in a certain government or a certain, business, it started with an idea, didn't it? And so basically all I'm doing is throwing out the years that I've been involved to be able to help encourage people, not only encourage people, but to encourage people to think in a different way. Let's see, here's another one. Let's see. Tom, why not give a suggestion for an action instead of whatever childish response comes from your lip first? I've never seen Nathan Warman before in my life. He has no idea who I am. And he responded by a meme that says, why do you got to be that way? To which I responded, why are you that way? And basically what it is a comment like that doesn't do anything to be able to help him understand me better. It doesn't help him, it doesn't arm him with things that he needs to know any better. But apparently from his response, he's not interested in it. He wants to be able to rip on me rather than rip on the abuses of the government. But you know what? I don't mind being ripped, because if I can be held accountable for the comments that I make, and I happen to make things that are wrong, and you guys can tell me that, I have no problem apologizing for it. The problem is this. We have a multitude of problems in this country, and everybody seems to be focusing on different problems. And although we have a few people that are focusing on every little problem, nobody's joining together to discuss anything that's any bigger. Thank you, Sarah, for that. I appreciate that. The comment didn't arm anybody with what to do. Oh, okay. That's a good point. Well, if you listen to what I said before, and that didn't work for you, then maybe I must be speaking Chinese. But I'm actually a little bit sick of what I'm seeing, and I'm sharing that here right now. Let's see. Eva said something. What did she say? Eva Selleck. So where do I find you, and what would you be doing? Okay. And my response to her was, I may be found in the public, depending on an event. I speak occasionally and prefer to meet with people one-on-one mostly. Although an activist, I have shifted gears in that I don't do things myself like I used to. I try to encourage other people to act instead. It isn't that I'm afraid to. I think I've made that pretty clear. But due to the fact that I feel unsuccessful, I feel the need to just go it alone. I thought it was me until I realized that people are mad and fearful, and they really don't know what to do. Basically, what I said is, let's see, Nathan Warman came on and said, maybe you shouldn't bitch about it on the internet while projecting about others bitching. Do what you do and keep going without doing the thing you're complaining about. Okay. So I'm not sure how I'm going to address what people are wanting, because there's a variety of things going on here. People want to know about what to do. My first response is to do about what? Do we want to focus on law enforcement? Do we want to focus on judicial hearings? Do we want to focus on Sarah Brady? Do we want to focus on Marissa? Do we want to focus on Ammon Bundy? Do we want to focus, let's see, let's try this. What do we want to focus on? So is the assumption that you're expecting when you're asking me what to do, that I openly just give you a blanket recipe that will solve all of our problems. And if that's true, I can try to do that. I can try to do that. But why don't we take some of the things and reduce them down a little bit? And I don't know that anybody else is having this conversation. So if I put mud on my face, I'm sorry, but I'm really just trying to be able to do what I'm not seeing anybody else do. So let's look at the situation. Let's take, since Sarah's been on here, let's talk about Sarah. Okay, Sarah, she's always been a good friend of mine. She still is, I hope, even after this video. She likes to hold me accountable, and I like to hold her accountable too. God bless her for the stuff that she's doing. She's trying to make a point. And I know that the only people that really resonate with her point, are the people within her circle of influence. So that if what I'm saying is true, then the first order of business would be to help more people understand exactly what's happening with Sarah. Now, I understand that people may not be interested in Sarah. She can't maybe get on the news as often as she wants to, which is tragic. But what we're going to have to do is, understanding that the media and the government are colluding together to be able to continue their narrative, we're going to have to figure out a way around that. So one of them is educating the people, right? Thanks, Ray. Love you too, bro. One of those things is to educate the public, right? Maybe what we do is we pick an instance and we launch a massive campaign. If we ended up, I was envisioning group leaders, movers and shakers, maybe not just leaders, movers and shakers, a group of us, right? And we get together and we discuss a plan of action on what that's actually going to look like. An education campaign, right? I mean, we certainly do it for elections. Now, everything is going to be based on what I saw in the primary elections. I was amazed at how many people I saw move and shake, knocking on 800 doors, 900 doors, 1,000 doors. You know, what if we ended up doing that with Sarah Brady? I mean, we're just using Sarah as an example right now. What if we did that? What if we knocked on doors and we communicated with people and said, hey, do you understand about this? Or maybe what we did is we removed Sarah in case she happens to be too toxic. And we talk about trespassing. And we talk about the fact that trespassing, there's no way in hell that using the Idaho statutes and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all of these freedoms afforded to us, that trespassing can even be possible. Can we launch a trespassing awareness campaign? I mean, the government can launch a breast cancer awareness campaign. They can launch an AIDS campaign. They can launch a gay pride campaign. They can launch all of that. You mean to tell me that we don't have the power to do that? Well, if we don't have the power to do that, we're going to need it. Okay? That's the one thing I'm going to tell you. So if you don't find that as a golden nugget, then that's fine. Okay? But at least I'm trying here to offer this to you. Okay, continuing on. Here's another thing. Sarah Brady was arrested by Meridian Police Department, I guess it was. Somebody, a law enforcement entity. Why? Well, because maybe the mayor actually decided to be able to create an executive order that allowed it to happen. Well, why did the mayor and the city council believe that they had the lawful authority to do that? Oh, because the people weren't there. The people weren't there. They weren't attending these meetings. They weren't there to hold government accountable. And even if they were, there weren't enough of them. So if you go in and you find out that the mayor is running roughshod over the citizens, what do? You go in there and you find out about it and you communicate with people and you let them understand exactly the fact that this is unlawful. And then when they laugh at you and they make fun of you, then you go and you bring more people. Okay? And we did this with the Middleton School Board. I mean, it was Mila Wood and Tammy Nichols and myself. What did we do? We were the only ones in the Middleton School Board for years and years and years. And you know what? We couldn't get anybody to show up. So they laughed at us. Right? I mean, there were some good things that happened, but overall they laughed at us. They did not see us as a force to be reckoned with. Why? Because the citizens weren't interested in that. Why? Because the citizens are either busy doing what they were doing, was being soccer moms or whatever, but they weren't interested in going to the school board because school boards are boring. And I attest to the fact that they are. And there's a lot of things in these school boards, if you don't go, you should see, if you have any sort of pulse and basic understanding of what's going on, you'll see exactly how badly they abuse you in these school boards. But most of these entities don't have people to visit them. They don't have school boards and they don't have city councils where people show up. They just don't. And another thing I want to tell you, I don't want to start coughing like I did last week, is we've got an issue with law enforcement. So the city council decides that it wants to create a law, right? And who's the entity that enforces the law? law enforcement, right? Which is why I launched the Support Your Local Police campaign, because I knew throughout history it wasn't only going to be the totalitarian edicts that came from the legislature and from the executive branch. They were going to create a Nazi Germany style totalitarian, Nazi Stasi type of an environment where law enforcement does what it does to defend the state against the citizens rather than the other way around. Why does that happen? The reason why that happens is because citizens are not involved in law enforcement. They're not. If they're not involved in city council, they're not involved in the school, they're not involved in the commissioners, they're not going to be involved in law enforcement. They're not involved in commissioners' hearings, they're not involved in planning and zoning, they're not involved in any part of their government. The only time they're ever involved in their government is when something personally affects them. Well, I went to planning and zoning because I wanted to build a house and they told me I can't build my house. I have an issue out here in my own property. I have to ask permission for what I want. Why is that? It's because somebody got away with empowering the commissioners. We did. We've allowed the commissioners to become, and planning and zoning, become so empowered that there's nothing that we can do right now. Well, the only thing that we can do then, getting from government, right? So going back to the Sarah Brady issue, okay, let's say Meridian Police Department came and they came after her. Well, do you think if a police chief that the constitutionally minded citizens had put in office would have done that? Or one that really felt like it needed to defend the state against the citizens? Well, the answer was quite clear. The police chief that decided that they did that felt like they were doing the right thing because they know where their bread is buttered, if you will. And I don't mean this out of a term of disrespect. But if the mayor, if the police chief answers to the mayor, and the mayor is not constitutional, and the police chief isn't constitutional, and the police chief doesn't understand his authority underneath the mayor, and stand against the unconstitutional edict, whose fault is that? Is that the cop's fault? Is that the mayor's fault? Or is that your fault? Well, it's everybody's fault, right? It's the fault of the citizens because they didn't hold the mayor and the city council accountable, and they didn't vote good people in office because we didn't think it was important enough. It's also the fault of the police chief because he didn't know better himself. But when you look at the mayor and the police chief and the commissioners and the council, where did they go to school? They went to liberal colleges and they went to liberal high schools. Isn't that what we're told? Is in America, we're a nation of, we even get this from constitutionalists, I hear, or Republicans. We're a nation, we're a rule of law. No, we're not really the rule of law. And I could go into that later. We're not a nation that's built on the rule of law at all. at all. What that means is if there's a statute created, then you have to obey it. No, that's not exactly right. That's not how our system works. If laws were created and they're deemed unconstitutional, then they're null and void. Okay? So not only have we've not encouraged ourselves, we haven't increased our ground game, we haven't educated the citizens, we haven't educated the people that we're electing, we've allowed them to become in office, we haven't held them accountable for the position that they're being in office, and they've amassed so much power, now they're starting to be able to be involved in woke politics, and now all of a sudden we're bitching because Sarah Brady's been arrested. And yet somehow we're supposed to go to her defense because she decided that she ended up believing that she was going to do what was right. And as tragic as it is, and that she can't get the adequate support that she needs from the attorneys and things of that nature, then it should empower citizens to do more than just show up to a hearing, Marissa's hearing or Sarah Brady's hearing or whatever. Because the offenses have already occurred. So knowing the fact that these people now have to basically go it alone, what are we going to do in the name of protecting people like Marissa and Sarah and all of these other political prisoners that we have, Ammon Bundy, all of these other people that have stood up wanting to make a point, have clearly made their point. The point has been completely destroyed by the government media narrative, like somehow we didn't think that would happen, and we didn't do anything about it. The offenses of we the people have already occurred, like Brian Carter just said. It's true. They've already occurred. So now what? If I end up stepping in, God, if you end up letting something happen to you or you step in something that you're not supposed to step into, is there a way to unstep in it? Maybe that should be a motto, Brian. What do you think? If you step in something, can you unstep in it? No. The only thing you can do is to figure out how to prevent other people from unstepping in it, from not stepping in it. And that, I think, is the essence of what I'm trying to say. So actions are there are certain similarities in actions and there's some differences in it, okay? If we were going to end up talking about a different topic, like Marissa, for example, and God bless baby Cyrus and Marissa, man, that family's awesome. But let's look at what happened. So their baby apparently is not well, right? Or whatever. There was an issue where they had assumed that the baby was not well, and CPS got involved. Okay. Well, CPS isn't involved. Should they be involved? They're a bureaucratic, unelected, rogue agency, and yet the only people that think that they're a rogue are the 35 people that showed up. Do you think that there's something that we should have done to help bring a greater awareness to CPS? CPS was instituted by people in the government. Do you think that CPS would have their power and their authority expanded if people like you and I were in office? No, they wouldn't. So what are we doing about that? Nothing. What we're going to do is we're going to protest a radically rogue organization like CPS, knowing, I hope we're knowing, that protesting isn't going to diminish their authority. What they're going to do is they're going to use that to further erode yours. So is there a way that we can utilize that to be able to go around, to be able to begin to limit the power of the CPS? And the answer is yes. There's a way to do that. So another thing, you've got Meridian Police Department or whoever. They show up in a bunch of cars. CPS makes one call, from what I understand. And all the cops are out there and they say they're looking for them for hours. Amazing in a technocratic state, isn't it? That they took them hours to be able to find out where somebody was. And then all of a sudden there's a bunch of them. And you know what the really weird thing is? All of them believed in defending the state against the citizen. All of them actually believed in defending CPS, right? We're not even talking about a rogue elected government. We're talking about supporting an unelected bureaucrat rogue agency with authority that it never had. And there's only 14 of us. You mean to tell me we can't launch an awareness campaign on CPS? For those of you that like to protest, it's really funny, right? We sit there and protest, and you know what's really weird? I used to be into protesting. I'm not anymore, even though I did see it work. But why haven't any of us been to the media? Why is KTVB, Communist News Channel 7, why are they still there? Why do they get to spew their garbage every single day and nobody holds them accountable? Does anybody know anybody at KTVB? Does anybody, we can't, you mean to tell me in the name of freedom of the press, when they chase people like ambulance chasing attorneys, that we can't ambulance chase them, so to speak, and to be able to hold them accountable everywhere they are? Why is it that we don't do that? Because we're too busy, because we're working, right? Well, just because we're working, and I know that it sounds like it might be an excuse, it isn't, okay? I know I do this for a living, okay? I'm paid to do this, okay? And I know that many people have full-time jobs, and that has to be tragic for me, because at some point, maybe that has to be a possibility for me too. I don't know. It depends on how much money we make, where our country's going, if we're even going to be alive in 2 minutes. I don't know. The point is that your country, whether you're involved or not, is getting more and more screwed up by the minute. And the longer that it goes, not being held accountable is going to be something that falls against your children and your life, the rest of your life. So if you don't want to be involved and you want to say that you're too busy, that's fine if you're too busy. Just understand that your government continues to go rogue. And if you're asking me what to do, then it's to make time. Do you know the best leaders are the ones that are the busiest? Yeah. The ones that make the best leaders are the ones that can't handle one more thing. And they manage to be able to make that time. Meanwhile, it's the people that don't really have a whole lot to do. They work, their job, and then they do whatever it is that they're doing, and and they don't make as good a leader because they don't have the commitment, or maybe they don't understand the seriousness of what we're facing. So give me some other things. You guys want to know what to do. I mean, it's all about holding government accountable, isn't it? So I think we're far right-wing extremist wackos, Kent. You know the reason why I believe that we're right-wing extremist wackos? The reason why I believe that we're right-wing extremist wackos, at least according to the media, is because we haven't made it popular yet, right? And you guys know I work for the John Birch Society, right? So people are like, oh yeah, I can't believe that I even, I'm not accepting what? I don't even know how, dude. Now you just completely changed my subject. So it's Brian Carter's fault that I can't remember where I'm coming from, where I was. You guys better pull me out of this because I'm sinking at the moment. Anyway, I've probably gone on too long. My point is that there's a lot of things that can be done. And I think that, some of the things that I was telling you that's important to do consistently, no matter what the problem is to be able to backtrack it a little bit. Identify the fact that there's, hey Maria, long time no hear. Recognize that there are abuses, right? Recognize that we are in a position where we're on the defense, right? We are reactive, okay? What we need to try to do is say, okay, how can we get in the position of being reactive to be, I know I never have anybody watch my videos. This is therapy for me. It's all good. How do we get from a position of being reactive to proactive? Okay? And one of those things isn't necessarily protesting, isn't necessarily banging garbage cans. It isn't necessarily doing that, because you have to ask yourself, what am I hoping to do with what I'm doing? And if I'm doing this, where is this going to go? Let's take the Ottawa truckers thing, for example. That was a fun one for me. I knew that it was a failure from the beginning. Why? I loved the fact that they did it. My wife and I were in tears and we're like, oh gosh, this is just the most amazing thing. But we realized it was going to be short-lived. We realized they were going to go for their bank accounts. We realized they were going to strip them of fuel. We realized that it was one of those things where they didn't get in the truck, and they didn't sit and think about it and talk about it and come up with a plan that I'm aware of and say, okay, if A happens, then let's consider what our plan B is. If B can't happen, then let's consider what our plan C is. And if plan C doesn't happen, let's figure out what plan D is. So you have these truckers, right? They roust everybody up. They head to Ottawa and they go there, and what happens? You have the parliament that comes down, openly condemns what they're doing, shuts them down, they go home. I told my wife that was one of those moments. If I would have done that, I would have had to consider whether I'm going to kiss my wife and kids and said, if I come home, I'll thank God if I make it home. Because we've got to be in one of those positions where it's where we fall on our own sword. It's that one issue that we're willing to fall on. But the thing about it is, we don't need to fall on those swords, and we don't need to become casualties to be able to make a point when we don't have a plan laid out about what we're going to do. Oh yeah, so what happened? Trespassing is really, really bad and somebody got arrested. You've made your point. Why get arrested to do it? Understand that you have to take that back and say, okay, this is the degree of what we're looking at. If we end up crossing over this line and we're going to end up getting cited for trespassing. Okay? So if we go over that line, we get cited, and then we're in the court system. Okay? Then now they've got you. They're going to grab you by the cojones, and then they're going to force you to be able to pay money. They're going to squeeze you through all kinds of anguish and all kinds of all that, because they want you to understand they control you. Or we can say, okay, this is where the line is. We understand where the line is. What we're going to do is we're going to stay just this side of the line. We're going to understand that we need to be able to educate enough people to know that trespassing in no way, shape, or form can go against public in a public place. It's exactly right, Kent. You can't trespass on public property. I wrote a 7-page series on my website talking about how that's not even possible. But so now that I've done that, if nobody else has, I think we all have, we should have all come together, figured out how we're going to be able to deal with this and how we're going to do that. The only reason why that trespass is in the statutes or has been contorted, and it depends on which way you look at this, is because we had legislators in there that nobody paid attention to how they got in. I'm guessing. I mean, there's election fraud and all that stuff we can consider too. But but I'm not going to admit election fraud at this point in time because we have horrible voting records. I mean, 20% is a horrible turnout. Why are people not voting? Because people are giving up. That's why. So if people are giving up, then what is it that you and I can do? Well, we can spend our time maybe launching an empowerment campaign to help people understand what America looks like when it's on fire. Right now, we're smoldering ashes. Everybody's walking around with their head between their legs, and they're all boo-hooey scared. And I sit here and I write stuff on antagonizing you guys on Facebook about like Greg Cheney. God, his wife loves me. I never even met her, but she said I went into their office and harassed her. It was weird. I don't even know where they are now. But this is the kind of thing that, right? I mean, we could have helped people understand about what trespassing looks like. But we didn't. Why didn't we? Oh, you know what we're going to do? We're just going to go down and we're going to protest and we're going to make it to where the governor feels like they're being threatened. So they're going to bring 100 ISP officers down there for one man. Well, did we go to the ISP? No. Did we communicate with any of the officers? No. So is it law enforcement's fault? No, not necessarily. Because those ISP officers I have met, I'm telling you, I have met them. And many of them are not like you think they are. But you have to understand what position they're in. You're going to say, well, why won't they stand for me? Why won't they just give up their job to be able to stand for liberty? It's like, are you standing up and quitting yours? No, you're not. I mean, if I can be honest, you're not either. None of us are. We still want to eat, right? We'll still pay taxes. We'll still put up with abuses for government, won't we? The important thing to consider is that there are certain actions that we need to be doing, and we need to be able to work with these people. Law enforcement, they look like they're, people are like, oh yeah, those jackbooted thugs. You don't know law enforcement like I know law enforcement, man. They're jackbooted thugs in law enforcement like they're jackbooted thugs that are in the Patriot movement or in any other movement. And the sad part is that we just love generalizing, right? We hate the fact that law enforcement will generalize like the feds or whatever and say, oh, that's right-wing extremism. And we're like, no, it isn't. But we don't have a problem generalizing them, saying they're jackbooted thugs. Is that ironic? I mean, this is what I'm getting from my own liberty movement. And so I find it very hypocritical. And you know what? Some of the reason why you guys don't find me out there is because I'm not like that. I used to align with people because we agreed on a lot of things, but we don't agree on stuff anymore. I don't know if it's because I'm smarter. I don't know what it is. I don't know if people have just gone nuts and I'm just like, I'm not going to do that. The object of what I do isn't wanting to get arrested. It isn't to be able to harass people to the point where I feel like they have to scream that I've committed a crime. I understand where that line in the sand is. So what I'm trying to do is to be able to operate on that preemptive side, on that offensive side, rather than operate on the defensive side. There's enough of you guys that are banging garbage cans and going to jail and ripping on cops and all that. And although I don't agree with it, look, man, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. But I'm not seeing a plan B. I'm not seeing a plan C. So how many times are you going to protest and think somehow it's doing something? If that works, why don't you just go listen to me in public? I'll go speak somewhere in public and I'll blow smoke up your backside, and you can go, yeah, I went and saw Tom once. Yeah. But what did it do? Nothing. You went to see me even, and you didn't get anything out of it. Now, I'm looking for methods to hold people accountable and make sure that certain things get done, but people don't want to do what I do. You know why? Because it takes a long time. I'm not the guy to get arrested. I'm not the guy to stick my finger up in the air. I'm not the guy that's going to do that. I'm the guy that's going to take the individual activism that I had, and I'm going to take all of that time and I'm going to encourage as many other people during the day to be as active as I can be so that they can become little me's or little you's or little individuals that are working on things. But you have to understand, and there's also something that we need to understand about what we're fighting. Somebody say, "Well, I'm fighting that garbage porn literature in the library." I'm like, "What are you doing?" "Well, I'm just going to create an awareness, the fact that there's porn literature in the library." But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and say, "Well, it's okay to have porn literature in the library. We just want it in a separate room." Are you kidding me? Is that really the essence of the fight? What if I told you that what's happening into the library is the same thing that's happening in the public school, that's the same thing that's happening in that's happening in universities, that's the same thing that's happening in your local government, that's the same thing that's happening in your state government, and it's all connected to something bigger? What if it was a global conspiracy? What if it was the United Nations? What if it was a United Nations subdivision called UNESCO? What if they were involved in implementing a global-wide education segment in the name of inclusion and tolerance? Would your fight be at a different level? I would say that it should be. An element should be focusing on the local issues for what they are, right? Because they're low-hanging fruit. And you're right, Ken, it totally is. It's the low-hanging fruit. But if you had the mindset to be able to understand that what you're fighting locally is global in nature, it changes the scope of everything. I used the thing about Trump and the USMCA. People think I'm crazy. Well, the USMCA trade agreement was really no different under Trump than the TPP under Obama. Most people don't know that. They openly admit it. The trade commissioner actually openly admitted it. But it became political because the USMCA under Trump is way better than anything that come out of Obama's. But yet people are in support of Trump. The problem is that we didn't understand the history of trade agreements. If we understand the history of trade agreements, which the John Birch Society has clearly articulated over the years, and you go back and you understand this began in this coal and steel community, I think it was in the 50s, and then there was and then it was going to be brought to. It was going to be brought in for a vote, but France and the Netherlands voted against it, and then they ended up passing it under the Maastricht Treaty in 1992. Trade agreements are a means of abolishing state sovereignty and destroying your economy and putting those in the hands of the United Nations Trade Commission, or whatever their version is. If you understood what was happening local was global in nature, would it change the way you look at something? When you look at issues related to the Great Reset, right? People will say, "Oh, well, they're making gas expensive, or they're making it difficult to eat, or they're trying to force us not to eat meat, or whatever it is. They're the ESG scores." Those are global. Those are not local. When you talk about the ESG scores to your local legislators, are you helping them understand where it comes from? No. Why? Sun Tzu, I think, said in his book, The Art of War, if you don't know your enemy and you don't know yourself, you're going to be imperiled in every battle. If we think the problems that we're dealing with are on a local level, perhaps we're not realizing that those are merely the branches on the tree rather than the root. If you want to understand how to beat the enemy, you have to understand the origin of where the conspiracy came from. And most of the things that we're facing now are global in nature. They have circumvented, the globe has circumvented Congress, they've circumvented the state legislatures, and they've gone right into the city councils and the school boards. And nobody's even talking about it. And I was told by Liberty people that were running for office that didn't even know who the two most powerful lobbying organizations were in the state. They told me that I wasn't even allowed to talk about Agenda 21. Why? Am I not allowed to call a spade a spade? Shouldn't you, if I'm going to alert my Idaho citizens about what Agenda 21 is, shouldn't I use the term? Because if I call it the Green New Deal or I call it something else, you're never going to know where to find the original source documentation for it. You're never going to know that what I'm saying is true. If I refer to the Great Reset as the Great, I don't know, Staples button or whatever, you're not going to know where the origin is. But if I point to you the Great Reset and Klaus Schwab's books and things, you can then begin to read, if you're going to read it all, and understand his own words in his own videos about what his plan is for your life. We are under a global conspiracy, guys, and it's attack that's unprecedented. It is the biggest conspiracy to overtake the entire globe, to destroy the entire planet, and we're allowing it to happen. And when you start talking about political prisoners and things of that nature, those things have a connection to the global government because they are not concerned about your Constitution. They are not even concerned about state statutes. They are concerned, I know. I thought you were leaving. Right? If we don't understand what we're dealing with, how are you going to come up with action items to be able to fight them? And so you might say, well, how do you fight the Great Reset, Tom? And I'd say, well, okay, in order to fight the Great Reset, it's a good question. It's global in scope, so it's going to be quite comprehensive. But how about if you ended up, and this is something I'm going to encourage everybody to do, if I'm going to encourage all of you guys to be able to write an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document or something like that with all of your elected officials on it. And I think it's a great way to start because nobody else has suggested it, so why not? And in that, you want to write down your legislative district, your congressional district. You want to write down your precinct. You want to write down your precinct chair. You want to write down you might even want to know who your Democrat representative for the Democrat Party is. You might want to write down your commissioners. You might want to write down your mayor and your city council members. You might want to be able to write down, let's see, did I say commissioners? You might want to write down your police chief, his contact information, the sheriff's contact information. You might even want to look up your department, your region for your Department of Transportation. You might want to include your weed control district, obviously your school board, and things of that nature. I'm telling you guys, it would be a game changer in my view if everybody had one of these lists. And I'm still working on mine. But if you had this list, what you might be able to do are some things like this. Something minor, right? You got a pothole on I-84 at exit 25 where I live. There's one over there between 26 and 27. If I would not have had the ITD phone number, I would never have been able to call him. And I would never let him say, hey, there's a Prius that's just been swallowed by one of your potholes. And now they know me. They're like, oh, Tom, hey, great job on the radio, whatever, right? I mean, it's cool. You find out that there are people in government that actually are like you, which is very helpful. And it's also very empowering. What would it be like if you had communicated with all of those people and you arranged to meet with them one-on-one and to have them understand who you are, and you went in there like I'm talking to you today, not like on some of my ranting videos, where you walked in and your genuine interest was to be able to understand who those people are, the kind of character those people are. One of the reasons that's important is because when somebody comes out and says, that guy's a jackbooted thug, and you can say, really, is that really interesting? Well, there's been many times where I've actually gone to the person that they were actually talking about, and I said, yeah, I had found out that they said this about you. What do you think? And you know what's funny? When they know you, they will tell you more than they've ever told anyone. And it's something that they say in confidence. And I would never share any of that stuff with you guys because those are things relating to the personal relationship that I have with somebody else about political affairs. We are not doing enough, guys, as citizens to hold our government accountable. We're not doing enough as citizens to hold each other accountable. We're not communicating in a way where our leadership can come together and we can say, well, if there's 50 groups and there's 50 leaders, then why aren't the leaders working together? Why aren't we bringing ourselves together and saying, okay, what are the big issues that we need to hit today? We can all have our own autonomy for sure, right? But isn't it in our best interest to be able to let people know where they can plug in? And I would say having multiple events like this during the year would be very helpful. We'll just line up and we'll say, hey, this is Liberty Avenue, baby. This is where we're all at. You want to plug in? We're here. You know, whether you want to be a member of my organization or you want to be a member of somebody else's, it's great. And we have there's an event in Twin Falls on Sunday, I think the 23rd. I think that's Sunday, at the park from 2 to 6. So if you guys want to go, you should go. But there's going to be a bunch of us there too. And the point is to start working together and start to find ways to leave the defensive position, move into the offensive position, and start utilizing and getting all of these people that are complaining on Facebook and start getting them active. Don't condemn me for the fact that I already know what to do. You don't have to tell me what to do. I already know. And I'm not saying that to be egotistical. I'm just saying if somebody's trying to remove a steeple from a church, I'm already there. I'm already on the phone. I'm already there. No pheasant hunting, man. You know, I'm already there. I don't need to know that. If something's going on with the governor, I call the governor. If there's something going on with the legislator, I call the legislator. That's how it works. Police chief, same thing. We need more people doing that. So if you're going to sit there and tell me, well, I'm protesting, what else do I need to do? It's like there's a lot more you can do. Protesting is like voting. You're going to go and show up and protest for 2 hours and then you're going to leave. You have to ask yourself, what is the point of the protest? What do you hope to gain from the protest? And what happens after the protest? And I think that's how, and I know that it's going to sound cliche or weak or whatever, but that's how America is saved. It's not reinventing the wheel. It's not overcomplicating activism. Most of the people that are active do. They find their hot button issue. It's like Misty and Sarah. I mean, those two are unstoppable. You got Sarah that's going off and doing what she's doing, and you got them. People are just cohesive, and they're working together, and they're working with other people, and they're trying to create an awareness. Now what we need to do is build a coalition on top of that. Can't they all tune me out? That's why there's only 11 people listening to this video. Maybe I'm long-winded. If I do, I'm blaming that on the society because I never talked this much before I started working for them. But I just care enough. And if I have to go on and do whatever it is they do when you talk all the time and you just never stop, I'll do that. But I want to be able to give people the tools. And I got kind of ripped into. I was a little sore. You know, I don't have thick skin. I have people they're a little bit offended, even friends that are a little offended by what I said, and I'm hoping that they didn't take it personally. But, you know, isn't it okay to be able to call a spade a spade? If I see something that's wrong and I see things that should be considered, shouldn't somebody be the one to call it out and say, you know what, maybe he's right? I don't know. If I'm wrong, the video can just be passed right over. But I think the whole point of communication with fellow people is always looking for the golden nugget, right? I mean, there'll be meetings that you have with certain people, and you always wonder. I believe that God puts us in front of people for a reason, right? We don't ever know the reason, but it's not for us to know. It's just that we acknowledge the fact that we're where we're supposed to be, who we're supposed to be with, talking about whatever we're talking about, and that is just part of what we were supposed to be doing. And so we just need to make sure that we utilize more of those opportunities, communicate with people more as if our lives depended on it, and stop ripping into each other about it. But I mean, it's okay. But I still think that if we need to be called on the carpet for something we're not doing, I still think it's okay to do. And if it's not, I apologize. But you know, I said what I said because I'm tired of being on the defensive. I'm tired of people getting angry. I'm tired of people becoming emotional. I know it's a trying time, but when people continue to get emotional and they stop seeing the forest for the trees, so to speak, which I never understood what that meant, we end up making mistakes. And we can't afford to make any mistakes. There are too many people watching. There's too much at stake. If America loses its freedom, the freedom around the world gets lost with it. So I want to be able to thank you guys for watching. I'm sorry it's so long, but if there's anything I said worthwhile, let me know. If there's something that you think sucks, tell me. And if there's anything I need to elaborate on, I will. And this video is in response to a thread that I had that from Sarah. So I plan on posting it there for whatever it's worth, but and not to antagonize them, just to be able to offer my perspective. So Brian, I thank you for showing up. So you said you were going to leave a half hour ago. You're still here. You should be hunting. And Kent, it's good to see you, man. And anyway, it's time that we all start working together as a team. If we realize that the battle that they're fighting is not between Republican and Democrat, it's between freedom and tyranny. We just have to decide what we're going to do. And with that, I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.